Hello and welcome to Easy Projects. In this video I will do a review of the JuLong laser, and you probably already guessed where that comes from. Yes, it is the absolute cheapest laser cutter that you can buy in China. But when that is said, it actually does the job, so it's not that bad. Well, let's take a look at it. So I have opened up the laser cutter, and what you see here is the cutting area. It can cut 30 centimeters in the X direction and 20 centimeters in the Y direction. It has this clamp for holding down your material or your workpiece, but I usually find myself just placing it on top, and this works okay. There is an optimal distance that the workpiece should be away from the cutting head in order to make the laser point as sharp as possible. But I find that it doesn't really make that much difference if you place it on top or in the clamp. It has this gray vent for sucking out the smoke and the fumes, but as you might guess, it doesn't work that well when it's so small. So that is something I may upgrade in the future. Also, if we zoom in a little bit, you can see these brown spots. That is actually from the laser itself. So that means that when you have this in here, it takes up some of the cutting area. It still does 20 by 30 though, so by removing this you'll just get a little bit extra. You can't just remove it though, because you need to get the fumes away. But if you do remove it, you have to come up with some other idea. There is a few LEDs to light up the cutting area, but then again, if you have enough light in the room, you don't really need them. And what is responsible for the cutting is this cutting head here. It has a lens in the bottom, and it has a mirror here at 45 degrees. This of course moves in the X and Y direction, and the hole you can see in the side here is where the laser enters the cutting head from this second mirror here that is also at 45 degrees. Then we have a third mirror. You can see that through the hole there, and that then points at the laser tube, and that's in there. We will take a look at that later. That is a 40 watt laser tube, and with a 40 watt you will be able to cut 4mm acrylic sheets with no problem. It doesn't cut very fast when you go to 4mm, but it will definitely do it. If you go down to something like 2mm, it goes reasonably fast. It can also cut in thin plywood, but I haven't actually tried anything thicker than 2mm. As an example, I can show you the enclosure I made for my electronic load, and I cut that out of 4mm acrylic. The text on the front panel here is just etched into the acrylic, meaning it doesn't go all the way through. Only like 0.5 millimeter into the material. And you can of course adjust how deep you want the engraving to be. I think it also looks pretty nice to make the symbols for the buttons with the laser cutter. But we will make a few other examples when we fire it up. Let's also just open the lid over the main control board here. The first thing we see is actually the power supply. But you can see the main board sits down here. And here is a better look of it. As you can see, there's not much really. And in the lid here, there's just a little board for the displays, the momentary push buttons, and you can see the toggle switches are mounted in the chassis there. The laser cutter does come with a blower, and that is the white one you can see there. But I will recommend you to do a little safety check on it. Mine came with the wrong plug on it, so I had to change that, and I'm glad I did that. Take a look at this clip here. So that is why you should always check everything you get from China, if it is something that plugs into the mains. And I of course fixed that, so now it looks something like this. Now, even though the laser cutter does come with a tube to blow the air outside, I will recommend you to buy another one of those as well, because the one that comes with it is a very thin blue tube that breaks easily. And mine even had a hole in it when I got it, so I had to buy another one. If we remove the blower, you can see the other end of the gray vent there. And if you compare the surface area of the vent to the surface area of the blower, you can see that that is not designed very well, so that can definitely be improved. If we lift this gray cover here, which by the way doesn't hold itself, you can see the laser tube. This mirror here is what we could see from the other side, and the laser will of course shine into that. It is a CO2 laser tube, which means that it got some gas in it. I can't remember the exact mixture, but there's of course CO2, but it also got some other inert gases in there. I think helium is one of them. The laser tube needs a high voltage to start up, and it is applied to the two electrodes. You can see one of them here, and the other one there. When the laser tube is started up, it is driven by a constant current. This is only a 40 watt laser, so it doesn't really get that warm, but it still needs water cooling. So you'll have cold water entering one end and exiting the other end. You can see there's actually 3 layers of glass, an outer protection layer and 2 inner tubes. And between the 2 inner ones, that is where the water flows. The tubing that comes with the laser cutter is not very long, so I had to extend them. The laser cutter comes with an aquarium pump. You can see that down in the bottom there. And I have that sitting in a reservoir of 10 liters of distilled water. I don't have any cooling on it, but 10 liters is enough that it doesn't really get warm. Okay, so that's enough talking. Let's turn it on. And as you just saw, both axes will home when you turn on the laser. And on the controls here you can set the power of the laser from 0 to 99.9%. It says something like ampere meter here, but that's bullshit, it's just a percentage. You can test fire the laser here. And I just burned away some paint there. You can also disable the laser, and this way the test fire and the automation doesn't work. So if you are cutting something and you turn off the laser, then it stops the cutting and just moves the head around. We can turn on the lights using this switch. And this infrared switch, you can see that's not connected to anything. So when you first get this laser cutter, you'll have to adjust the mirrors to make sure this laser beam is parallel to this one. And also this laser beam going here is perpendicular to these two. It is a little fiddly, but it is actually pretty easy when you get used to it. There is a video on the CD that comes with the laser cutter that kind of shows you how to do it, but it's all in Chinese, so I'll just show you how I do it. And perhaps you noticed I just switched to the old camera just to make sure that I don't burn the new one with the laser, in case something should reflect and get into the lens. We don't want that. So the first thing I do is to rip a little corner off a sticky note, and you want to keep the sticky end. I then make it a little concave, like so. And I then mount it on the cutting head in front of the little hole there. Now you want to set the power of the laser to about 20%. Now to check if the beam is aligned, I will place the cutting head in 4 different positions. In each corner, that is. And then fire the laser very quickly at each position. If all 4 spots land precisely on top of each other on the sticky note here, that means your beam is aligned. So let's see if mine is. So I actually hold down the button too long there, so it burned a big hole in the sticky note. You can still tell if it is far out, but you want the spots to be smaller to make sure that it's properly aligned. But as you can see, they all landed approximately in the same spot. So that is all fine, but not really that helpful, right? Because when you get your laser, it will not be aligned, and you have to do that. So the way you do it, as I said, is actually very simple, because you can do one mirror at a time, and one will not affect the other. So this mirror here is mounted on this block that moves on the y-axis, and it also got the cutting head on it. And from that we know that the angle of reflection from this mirror to the cutting head will always be the same, no matter which position you take on the y-axis. So imagine your beam is a little bit off, or a lot off, like this, and it will hit, say, somewhere out here. So that is actually far away from the cutting head itself. Now we can try and move the y-axis up here, and if we do that, this mirror will now be approximately here. And we didn't change the angle of this mirror, of course, it's just my drawing that's bad. But you can see before it hit here, and now it hits here. Since the angle is still the same, it means that it will move the dot on the sticky note this far. So we would adjust the top mirror a little bit like this, in order to get this beam perpendicular. And when it is perpendicular, you can see it will make no difference if the mirror is here or here. But we still didn't adjust this mirror. And you of course just keep adjusting this until you get the spot in the exact same place when you move the y-axis. And you have to make sure that you do not move the x-axis, so don't move the cutting head back and forth like this. And when you got this perfect, we move on to the x-axis. So now we got this mirror perfect, and now it's just a matter of placing a new sticky note and then moving the cutting head back and forth. You can see now the beam will hit here, but if we move it over here, then the beam will hit here somewhere. So it will move about this far. And then you can just adjust this mirror a little this way. That will correct the beam. And when you got it perfect, so when it is parallel to this one, you can see it will make no difference if the sticky note is here or here. It will hit the same place. And now when we got these two adjustments correct, it shouldn't matter if you place it there, 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 or there. And I recommend you do this as a final test, just to see that nothing had moved. And I think I forgot to say, but the mirrors have 3 screws on the back side that you can adjust to either tilt it this way or this way, or a combination of both. So you also need to install some software on your computer to use the laser cutter. and you can install that from the supplied CD. There is some different drawing programs. The one called LaserDRW will allow you to send the files to a laser cutter. You also want to plug in the USB dongle that they gave you, and you don't want to misplace this, because without it the program cannot communicate with the laser. And don't mind the image I had on the screen there, that was actually a bad example, because the laser will engrave or cut anything that is black, like this. If you just have a line like this and the object is not solid, it will then actually cut on both sides of the line, because it thinks you want the black object, which is just a line. So let's try to make something real quick. I will select the circle here and draw a circle. You can then enter the exact dimensions to the right here. So we'll make it, say, 60 millimeters by 32 millimeters. And we want to move it into the work area. You can also change the thickness of the line here. So say we want a line of 1.5 millimeters. Oops, sorry, that was not there. It helps if you read what's on the screen. Like that. Or actually let's make it 2.5. And notice that it will only make it wider on the inside. We can then go ahead and write some text here. And we can select a font. So I like this one. We can then draw it. And don't mind the shape too much. It's actually easier just to plunge in the numbers over here. And if you want it straight, just make sure that Y1 and Y2 is the same. You can then move one of the X points here. You can make it taller here, or you can edit the height here. Still a little bit too big. If you select an object, you can also move it with the arrow keys. We can make another circle, say 3.5 millimeter. And let's place it about in the middle. So now I'm happy with this design, just for a quick test. Or we can make this solid, doesn't matter. And now I want to engrave it. So I go to the engrave menu, and first we want to press the device initialize. And you of course want to plug in your laser and turn it on. And you can see it popped up down there. And now the first time you press this, nothing will happen, because you need to put in your device ID down here, or the serial number, and you have to select the correct model of the main board. And let's go to the laser. So these are one of the things that's a little difficult to figure out by yourself, but now I will tell you. You can find the model number of the main board here, you can see where it says 6C6079, I think, laser M2. So that is the main board model you want to plug into the program. And your serial number or device ID is on this sticker here. So just plug in whatever number is on your laser. When you have done that, you may need to restart the program and power cycle the laser. But when you got it right, you should hear the laser home itself when you open this window. And also if you change the origin, so say 40 instead, you can hear the laser moves accordingly. So the origin you set here will by default be the top left corner, and you can see that is this corner here. So you can change this origin here to move the cutting head inside the laser to make sure you cut or engrave in the correct spot. So this looks fine for me. I'll just move this and press OK. And I'll just move this a little closer to the origin. So now we are ready to send it to the laser. You can press engrave and engrave, and it will open up this window. And the most important thing in here is the style, which is currently set to cutting. And of course, if you want to engrave something, it's a good idea to do that first. Or you can also cut it out and then make some kind of jig to hold it and engrave it afterwards. But let's select engraving. And you want to select sunken here to make the black parts where it does the engraving. I usually use a speed of 150 for this. And you can select the resolution in pixels down here. So the lower this is, the finer your image will be. So now we're actually ready with the program. We just want to make sure that the laser is set up correctly. So let's go there. So depending on how deep you want to do the engraving, you can change the power of the laser. I usually run the power as low as possible to kind of save the laser tube. I don't really know how much influence that has, but it's just an idea I got. So I find that a power of 20 and a speed of 150 makes a decent engraving. So I'll stick with that. Now when you do engraving, you want to remove the protective film on that side of the acrylic plate if you're doing acrylic. If you do wood, of course, then you don't have to remove anything. But a nice trick is just to cut it with a sharp knife or an X-Acto knife, a little larger than the dimensions you want to cut. This will allow you just to remove the film in that area, and you can still use the rest of the plate for whatever you want. You then want to align your acrylic plate so that the origin of the laser is just inside the top left corner of the plate, and you can use the test fire to verify that. You can see it just hit the plate there. Now I think I'll actually go and change this to a clear acrylic, just so you can see better what is going on the camera. So I hope it will be better to record through this clear acrylic. When I tried to record through the colored one, it didn't turn out that well, so we can hope for the best. So we set the laser to 20% and we aligned the workpiece. So now I will just press start on the computer and it should do the engraving for us. And now it's done. And now if we want to cut out what we just made, remember I said we have to make the object that we want solid black. So we want to get rid of the text. Just press delete and press the circle, and you can press solid over here. That will make it solid, but the line here will be white, so I have to set the pen width to 0.1 or something like that, and we will select our small circle and make that solid white. So now the black part is what we want, so it will cut out this little white one, and then it will cut out the black one. We go to engrave, and you can hear the laser cutter is homing itself. Now instead of engraving, we want to take cutting, and what is important here of course is that it takes the inside first. And now if I remember correctly, we can use a speed of 10, and we can correct this back to 2. So now that's ready, and we have to get the laser cutter ready. Now of course we don't want to move the workpiece at all, because then it will not be aligned with the engraving. But we do want to up the power a little bit, and I think 80 will do. So now the laser cutter is ready as well, and I will just go press start. And it's done. And do remember to turn off the laser before you start poking around in there, so you don't cut your fingers off. So now we can remove the protecting film from the back. And now we got ourselves a nice keychain. Now I would probably make it in a little bit thicker material, because this can actually break. So, but unless you literally throw your keys around, I think it won't break. I have got a 3mm one in my car keys for quite some time now, and at least that didn't break yet. So, and on this one I actually made the hole very close to the edge here. It does get a little scratched with time though. This stuff in here is mostly just dirt, so don't mind that. So you're only limited by your imagination really. Here's a small gear that I cut out. Okay, let's try and make something different. Tell me when you guessed what it is. So I turned up the speed a little there, and it looks like it didn't cut all the way through, all the way around, so I'll just go over it real quick again. So, did you guess what it is? It's a ruler. And here you can actually see a little problem you can get with acrylic, because if the smoke is dragged along the surface of the plate, it can make it matte like this. And you can't really use any kind of solvent on the acrylic, because that will make it crack. So you can't use like alcohol or acetone or something like that. What you can do to remove it is to buff it with a paste like this for copper and brass. You do need to use some elbow grease, but it will take it off. And without damaging the acrylic, that is, because you can also take it off with alcohol, but that will just crack the acrylic, so no point in that. And here it is after a quick buffing, and I did remove it all. There's a little bit left here, but I could just do it again and remove the last bit. And I don't know if it shows up on camera, but there's this little curvy line here up the top, and that is actually because I cut it all the way at the edge of the acrylic plate. So the protective film on the back had lifted a little bit there, and where it lifted, that is this edge here. So to avoid that, I should just have moved it a few millimeters down. And now that I hold it in front of the camera, I can see that I didn't get all the buffing washed off either, so yeah, I could do better. So these are just some of the things you can make with a laser cutter like this. As I said earlier, you're only limited by your imagination, really. And if you wanted to make something like this ruler really professional, you could start by cutting it at an angle like this, so the laser will cut like this. So you could actually make the front edge here at, say, 45 degrees or something, instead of this where it's just square. Or actually, one thing I forgot to say, the Z-axis here, or the vertical direction where it cuts down, is actually not 100% square. You can see there's a little angle there. And that is because the laser cutter is using a lens. So the beam will be wide here, it will go down to a very sharp point, and then it will start to get wider again. And if you keep your workpiece right in the middle, you should actually be able to get this square, or almost square. And the laser will also be able to remove more material at the top, of course, so you might not get it square even though you get it right in the focus point. Anyway, I hope you liked my review of the laser cutter. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, and subscribe to my channel if you're not already subscribed. And I hope to see you in the next video.